Marcus Chen had always believed that retirement meant peace. After 30 years as a forest ranger, he thought his biggest worry would be deciding which hiking trail to take each morning. His small cabin sat nestled between ancient pine trees, 3 hours from the nearest town. The silence was perfect, broken only by birdsong and the occasional deer wandering through his garden. That morning started like any other. Marcus made his coffee, stepped onto his wooden porch, and breathed in the crisp mountain air. The fog hung low between the trees, creating ghostly shapes that danced in the early sunlight. He had just taken his first sip when he heard it. A sound like thunder, but deeper. More painful. The ground beneath his feet trembled slightly. Coffee splashed from his mug onto the porch boards. Marcus set the cup down and listened carefully. 30 years in these mountains had taught him to recognize every natural sound. This was not natural. The sound came again, echoing through the valley like a wounded animal crying for help. But no animal made sounds that deep, that full of ancient sorrow. Marcus grabbed his jacket and hiking boots. Whatever was making that noise was in serious trouble. He followed the sound deeper into the forest than he had ever ventured. The trees grew thicker here, their branches creating a canopy so dense that morning light barely touched the ground. Moss covered everything like a soft green carpet. The air smelled of earth and old magic. The crying grew louder with each step. Marcus pushed through a wall of hanging branches and stepped into a clearing he had never seen before. What he found there changed everything he thought he knew about the world. An enormous dragon lay collapsed against a rocky outcropping. Her scales, once brilliant emerald, had faded to the color of old leaves. Her massive head rested on the ground, and one wing hung at an unnatural angle. Blood, dark as midnight, pooled beneath her body. Her eyes, larger than dinner plates, held intelligence and pain that made Marcus step backward. Those ancient eyes fixed on him. The dragon tried to lift her head but could only manage a few inches before exhaustion forced her back down. Her voice, when it came, was like distant thunder. "Human! You should run." Marcus stood frozen. Dragons were supposed to be myths. Stories parents told children. Yet here lay proof that legends walked the earth. His ranger training kicked in. Injured animal meant potential danger, but it also meant a creature that needed help. "You're hurt," Marcus said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. The dragon's eyes widened slightly. "You can understand me?" "Clear as day." Marcus took a careful step closer. "What happened to you?" "Hunters," the dragon whispered. "With weapons that sing of technology one do not understand. They wounded me 3 days ago. I have been trying to reach the old healing pools, but..." She gestured weakly with one claw toward her damaged wing. Marcus examined the wing from a safe distance. The membrane was torn in several places, and he could see what looked like metal fragments embedded in the flesh. "Those need to come out or infection will set in." The dragon laughed, a sound like distant thunder mixed with sadness. "A human offering to help an elder dragon. The world has become strange indeed." "Maybe so," Marcus said, shrugging off his jacket. "But I've patched up plenty of wounded animals. Size doesn't change the basics." Over the next hour, Marcus worked carefully to remove the metal fragments from the dragon's wing. She was surprisingly patient, only wincing when he had to dig particularly deep. The fragments were unlike anything he had seen. They looked almost organic, but with a metallic sheen that seemed to shift colors in the light. "These aren't normal bullets," Marcus muttered, holding one up to examine it. "No," the dragon agreed. "The hunters who shot me were not normal humans either. They smelled of chemicals and fear. Their weapons hummed with unnatural energy." As Marcus cleaned the wounds with water from his canteen, he found himself talking to the dragon as if she were any other injured animal he had helped over the years. "What's your name?" "I'm Marcus." "I am Verdania," she replied. "I have lived in these mountains for over 800 years. Until 3 days ago, no human had ever ventured this deep into my territory." 800 years? Marcus paused in his work. "That makes you pretty wise, I'd guess." Wise enough to know that helping me may bring you trouble, Marcus Chen. Marcus froze. He had never told her his full name. How did you dragons see more than humans realize? I can see the threads of possibility that surround you. Some lead to great danger. Others to great purpose. By helping me, you have begun walking a path that will change both our lives. As the day wore on, Marcus made multiple trips between his cabin and the clearing, bringing supplies to help Verdania heal. He brought bandages, antiseptic, and food. The dragon was surprised to learn that humans could eat some of the same plants she did, though she preferred her meals much larger than Marcus could provide. By evening, Verdania was able to lift her head properly and even fold her wing without obvious pain. The worst of the bleeding had stopped, though Marcus knew it would be days before she was strong enough to fly. You should go home, Verdania said as sunset painted the sky orange and red. Return to your peaceful retirement. Forget you ever found me here. Marcus gathered his supplies slowly. Will I see you again? That depends, Verdania replied, on whether you truly want to. Knowing that dragons exist will change how you see the world. You cannot unknow what you have learned today. Marcus looked at this magnificent creature who had somehow become real in the space of a single day. All his life, he had felt like something was missing. Some purpose beyond just maintaining hiking trails and filing reports. Maybe this was it. I'll be back tomorrow, he said firmly. Those wounds need to be checked, and you'll need more food while you recover. Verdania watched him walk away. When Marcus reached the edge of the clearing, her voice followed him through the darkening forest. Be careful, Marcus Chen. The hunters who wounded me are still out there. And, now that you have helped me, you may find yourself on their list as well. Marcus woke the next morning to the sound of helicopters in the distance. 3 of them, flying in formation toward the deep forest. Toward Verdania's clearing. He grabbed his gear and ran. The helicopters had landed in a meadow half a mile from where Verdania was hiding. Marcus could see armed figures in strange tactical gear moving through the trees. They carried weapons unlike anything he had seen in his military service years ago. The metal seemed to shift and flow like liquid, and they hummed with an energy that made his teeth ache. Marcus took a longer route to reach Verdania, staying well clear of the search teams. When he finally reached the clearing, he found the dragon alert and tense. They have returned, she said without preamble. 6 of them this time. Their weapons are stronger than before. Can you fly yet? Marcus asked, checking the bandages on her wing. Not well enough to escape them. And, even if I could, they would only follow me to the healing pools. Other dragons go there. I will not lead these hunters to my kin. Marcus thought quickly. His cabin had a large garage where he stored his old Park Service truck. It was big enough to hide a dragon, barely. What if we could get you somewhere safe while you finish healing? Verdania tilted her massive head. You would risk your home for me? My home's not much good if it doesn't protect the people I care about, Marcus replied. Moving an injured dragon turned out to be more complicated than Marcus had expected. Verdania could walk, but slowly, and her dark scales were hard to camouflage in daylight. They had to wait until after sunset, then make their way carefully through the forest. Twice they had to stop and hide while search teams passed nearby. Marcus pressed himself against Verdania's warm flank, listening to her heartbeat and marveling at the strangeness of his new reality. When they finally reached his cabin, getting Verdania into the garage required removing her largest trailer and stacking boxes to the ceiling. The dragon curled up in the space like a cat, though a cat the size of a small truck. This is highly irregular, Verdania murmured, but Marcus could hear amusement in her ancient voice. Most of my life has been pretty regular up until now, Marcus replied. I think I like irregular better. That night, Marcus sat in his garage reading by lamplight while Verdania dozed. She had told him stories of the old days, when dragons and humans lived in closer harmony. When magic was common knowledge rather than fairy tale. Why did dragons disappear? Marcus had asked. We did not disappear, Verdania had explained. We hid. As humans grew more numerous and their weapons more deadly, it became safer to remain legend than reality. But some of us stayed, watching over the wild places, keeping the old knowledge alive. And now these hunters have found you. They are not ordinary hunters, Verdania said. They seek dragons specifically. Their weapons are designed to wound rather than kill quickly. They want us alive. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Why? I do not know. But I suspect we will learn soon enough. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Marcus was making breakfast when he heard vehicles approaching his cabin. He looked out the kitchen window and saw 2 black SUVs parking in his driveway. Men in expensive suits climbed out, followed by others in tactical gear. They moved with the confidence of people accustomed to getting what they wanted. Marcus walked out to meet them, keeping his expression neutral. 30 years as a park ranger had taught him how to deal with difficult visitors. The lead man was tall and thin, with silver hair and pale eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. He smiled, but the expression never reached his eyes. "Mr. Chen," the man said, extending a hand. "I am Dr. Sebastian Voss. I represent a government research division. We believe you may have information that could help us with a matter of national security." Marcus shook the offered hand, noting how cold it was. "I'm retired, Dr. Voss. I'm not sure what information I could have that would interest the government. We have reason to believe you may have encountered something unusual in these mountains recently. Something that could pose a significant threat to public safety." Behind Dr. Voss, the tactical team was spreading out, examining Marcus's property with professional thoroughness. Marcus felt his heart rate increase but kept his voice steady. "I see unusual things in these mountains every day," Marcus replied. "It's why I love living here." "You'll have to be more specific." Dr. Voss pulled out a tablet and showed Marcus a photograph. It was blurry, taken from a distance, but it clearly showed large tracks in muddy ground. Dragon tracks. These were found near where our research team was conducting an environmental survey, Dr. Voss explained. "We believe they may have been made by an unknown species of large predator. Possibly injured and, therefore, particularly dangerous." Marcus studied the photograph with what he hoped looked like professional interest. "Those could be bear tracks," he said finally. "Brown bears can get pretty big up here, and their paws can make unusual marks in soft ground." "Perhaps," Dr. Voss agreed, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "Nevertheless, we would appreciate your cooperation in helping us locate whatever made these tracks. As a former park ranger, you know these mountains better than anyone." "I'd be happy to help with a legitimate research project," Marcus said carefully. "Do you have permits for whatever you're doing up here?" For the first time, Dr. Voss's smile became slightly strained. "Our work is classified, Mr. Chen. But, I assure you, it's entirely legal and necessary." Marcus nodded slowly. "Well, I'll keep an eye out for any unusual animal sign. If I see anything dangerous, I'll be sure to call the local wildlife authorities." Dr. Voss studied Marcus's face for a long moment. "Yes," he said finally. "I'm sure you will. We'll be conducting our research from a base camp about 10 miles north of here. If you think of anything that might be helpful, please don't hesitate to contact us." He handed Marcus a business card with only a phone number printed on it. After the vehicles drove away, Marcus waited a full hour before entering his garage. Verdania was awake and alert, her great eyes reflecting the worry Marcus felt. "They know you helped me," she said without preamble. "They suspect," Marcus corrected. "But suspecting and proving are different things." Verdania shifted uncomfortably in the cramped space. "You should not have risked this, Marcus. These people will not give up easily." "Then, we need to figure out what they really want and why they're hunting dragons," Marcus replied. "Because I have a feeling this is bigger than just one injured dragon in the mountains." That evening, Marcus called his old friend Jake Morrison, who worked for the state wildlife department. They had been partners for 15 years before Jake took a promotion to the state office. "Jake, it's Marcus. I need a favor."
Marcus, how's retirement treating you? Interesting question. Listen, have you heard anything about federal research teams working in the Cascade Mountains? Something involving unusual animal tracks?
There was a pause.
Not officially. But there have been some weird requests coming through channels lately. People asking about old Native American legends, stories about large predators that supposedly lived in the mountains centuries ago.
What kind of stories?
The kind that usually involve scales and breathing fire, Jake said with a laugh. Why? You running into some government types up there?
Just curious, Marcus said.
If you hear anything official, let me know.
Sure thing.
Marcus, be careful up there, okay? I've been hearing rumors about some kind of black budget operation in your area. The kind where people ask questions first and apologize later.
After hanging up, Marcus sat in his kitchen thinking. Government researchers with advanced weapons, hunting dragons for unknown reasons.
Verdania had been right.
This was bigger than either of them had realized. He was still thinking when he heard the sound of helicopter rotors approaching in the darkness. Marcus turned off all the lights in his cabin and moved to the garage. Verdania was already awake, her eyes reflecting the dim starlight filtering through the small windows.
More hunters, she whispered.
Probably, Marcus replied, checking the locks on the garage doors.
Can you make yourself smaller somehow?
Dragons are not house cats, Verdania replied dryly, but she tucked her head under her wing and curled her tail more tightly around her body. The helicopters circled Marcus's property twice before moving on toward the deeper forest.
But Marcus knew they would be back.
And, next time, they might have warrants or equipment that could see through garage walls.
We can't stay here much longer, he told Verdania. I know, she replied. My wing is nearly healed. Another day or two, and I should be able to fly short distances. Where will you go?
Verdania was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she had fallen asleep. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. There is a place, deep in the Canadian wilderness, where a few of my kind still gather. It has been protected by old agreements and older magic. But the journey is long and dangerous, especially with these hunters searching for me.
What if you didn't have to make that journey alone? Marcus asked.
Verdania lifted her head to look at him.
What do you mean? I mean, what if someone helped you get there? Someone who knows these mountains and can travel without attracting attention?
Marcus Chen, Verdania said slowly, are you suggesting that a retired park ranger accompany an elder dragon on a flight to Canada while being pursued by government agents with advanced weapons? When you put it like that, it sounds kind of crazy, Marcus admitted.
Yes, Verdania agreed. Completely insane. Utterly dangerous. Likely to end in disaster for both of us. Marcus waited.
I accept your offer, Verdania said. That night, Marcus packed a bag with everything he thought he might need for a journey into the unknown. Camping gear, first aid supplies, and food that would travel well. He also packed his grandfather's old compass and a detailed map of the northern wilderness. As dawn broke over the mountains, Marcus Chen looked around his peaceful retirement cabin one last time. He had thought this would be his final home, the place where he would spend his remaining years in quiet contentment. Instead, it had become the launching point for the greatest adventure of his life. In the garage, Verdania stretched her wings experimentally. The injured membrane held strong, and she could fold and unfold both wings without pain.
Are you ready for this? Marcus asked. I am 800 years old, Verdania replied.
I have seen empires rise and fall, watched forests grow from seedlings to ancient groves, and survived the transition from magic to technology.
I am ready for whatever comes next.
Marcus opened the garage doors and stepped out into the morning light. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear helicopter rotors again. Dr. Voss and his team were still searching, still hunting. But they were looking for a wounded dragon hiding in the forest. They were not looking for a dragon and her human companion about to embark on the flight of their lives.
Marcus climbed onto Verdania's back, settling between two of her massive neck scales.
The leather of his hiking boots gripped her scales better than he had expected.
Hold tight, Verdania warned. Flying is different from walking.
She spread her wings wide, blocking out the morning sun.
With a powerful thrust that Marcus felt through his entire body, Verdania launched herself into the sky.
The ground fell away beneath them with startling speed.
Marcus's cabin became a tiny brown dot among the green trees.
The mountains spread out in all directions like a rumpled blanket, beautiful and wild and infinite. For the first time in his life, Marcus Chen was truly flying. But, behind them, rising from the tree line like angry insects, 3 black helicopters were beginning pursuit. Flying on dragonback was nothing like Marcus had imagined. The wind was fierce and constant, threatening to tear him from Verdania's scales with every wing beat. His eyes watered behind his sunglasses, and his hands ached from gripping the ridge of scales along her neck. But the view was incredible.
Below them, the Cascade Mountains rolled away in endless waves of green.
Rivers cut silver lines through valleys that no human had ever walked.
Eagles soared far beneath them, mere specks against the forest canopy.
Marcus understood why dragons had ruled the skies for so many centuries.
"How are you doing back there?"
Verdania called over the rush of wind.
"Still attached." Marcus shouted back. "How far behind are those helicopters?" Verdania tilted her head to look back. Her vision was far sharper than any human's. "Close enough to be dangerous. They are gaining slowly." Marcus risked a glance behind them. The 3 black helicopters looked like deadly insects, their rotors catching the morning sunlight as they climbed to match Verdania's altitude.
Even at this distance, he could see weapons pods mounted on their sides.
"Can you go higher?" Marcus asked.
"Yes, but the air grows thin. You will have trouble breathing."
"Better than the alternative."
Verdania angled her wings upward, climbing toward the wisps of cloud that hung above the mountain peaks. The air grew cold quickly. Marcus's breath began to come in short puffs, and his fingers went numb despite his gloves. The helicopters followed them up, but more slowly. Their engines labored in the thin air, and Marcus could see them struggling to maintain their climb. "They are not built for this altitude," Verdania observed with satisfaction.
"We have bought ourselves time."
They flew through the cloud layer, emerging into brilliant sunlight above a sea of white. The peaks of the highest mountains jutted up through the clouds like islands. It was beautiful and alien, a world that existed parallel to the ground-bound reality Marcus had known all his life.
"Where exactly are we going?" Marcus asked. "North," Verdania replied. "Past the major human settlements, into the wilderness where the old territories still exist. There is a valley there, hidden by more than geography. My people call it the Last Grove." "How far?"
"For a human vehicle, many days of travel through difficult terrain. For us, perhaps 6 hours of flying.
But we will need to stop and rest. I am still recovering from my injuries." Marcus nodded, though he knew she couldn't see him. 6 hours on dragonback, pursued by government agents. It sounded impossible. But, then, everything about the last 3 days had been impossible. Below them, the cloud layer was breaking up, revealing a landscape Marcus didn't recognize.
They had traveled farther north than he had ever been, into wilderness that existed only on the most detailed maps.
"Verdania," Marcus said, "what exactly are these people after? Why are they hunting dragons?"
The dragon was quiet for a long moment, her massive wings beating steadily. When she finally spoke, her voice carried centuries of sadness.
"Dragons are not just large animals, Marcus. We are repositories of old knowledge. Magic, if you will, though that word has lost much of its meaning in your modern world. We remember things that humans have forgotten.
Technologies that do not depend on electricity or petroleum.
Healing arts that work with the body's natural energy rather than against it."
Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the altitude.
"They want to harvest your knowledge.
Worse. They want to harvest us.
Dragons live for thousands of years. Our blood carries genetic information that spans millennia.
Our scales can be ground into components for medicines.
Our organs contain biological compounds that do not exist anywhere else in nature. That's monstrous.
It is profitable, Verdania corrected.
And, in your world, profit often outweighs morality.
They descended through another break in the clouds, and Marcus saw something that made his heart sink.
Below them, a highway cut a straight line across the wilderness.
And, on that highway, a convoy of vehicles was racing north, keeping pace with their flight.
They're coordinating the pursuit, Marcus realized. Air and ground teams.
I see them, Verdania said grimly. Dr. Voss is more thorough than I had hoped. The highway disappeared behind them, but Marcus knew there would be other roads.
Other teams waiting ahead.
Dr. Voss had resources that Marcus was only beginning to understand. They flew over a small town where people emerged from their houses to stare up at them in amazement.
Some waved.
Others pulled out phones to record the impossible sight of a dragon carrying a human passenger across the morning sky. So much for keeping a low profile, Marcus muttered. Perhaps that is for the best, Verdania replied. Let the world see that dragons still exist. It becomes harder to make us disappear if everyone knows we are here. An hour later, they touched down beside a mountain lake to rest. Verdania's breathing was labored, and Marcus could see that the sustained flight was taking its toll on her healing body. He climbed down from her back on shaking legs, grateful to feel solid ground beneath his feet again. The lake was pristine, surrounded by pine trees that had never known an axe. Fish jumped in the still water, and, somewhere in the forest, a loon called its haunting zone. It was the kind of place that existed only in national parks and conservation areas. This is beautiful, Marcus said, kneeling beside the water to splash his face. It will not exist much longer, Verdania replied sadly. The mining rights to this area were sold to a corporation last year. They will begin clearing the forest next spring.
Marcus felt something twist in his chest.
30 years as a park ranger had shown him too many places like this, wild and perfect until human industry arrived to claim them.
Maybe we can change that, he said. One dragon and one human against an entire corporation? Verdania shook her massive head.
That is optimism beyond reason.
Maybe. But somebody has to try.
They rested by the lake for 30 minutes before the sound of approaching helicopters forced them back into the air. This time, Marcus could see that there were 4 aircraft pursuing them, not 3.
Dr. Voss was calling in reinforcements. How much farther to this last grove?
Marcus asked as they climbed back toward the clouds.
3 hours, Verdania replied. If we can stay ahead of them that long. The next leg of their journey took them over terrain that grew increasingly wild. Roads became rare, then disappeared entirely.
The mountains grew taller and more jagged, carved by ancient glaciers into shapes that seemed almost deliberately inhospitable to human settlement. Marcus began to understand why dragons had chosen this region as their final refuge. It was a place that resisted civilization, where nature still held dominion over technology.
But, even here, the helicopters followed them.
Worse, Marcus could see aircraft ahead of them as well. Dr. Voss had managed to get teams positioned along their route.
The net was closing.
Verdania, Marcus said urgently, we need to change course.
They're hurting us.
I know, the dragon replied. But, there are only so many routes through these mountains that I can fly safely.
Dr. Voss knows this as well.
They crested a ridge and found themselves facing a sight that made Marcus's blood run cold. A helicopter hung directly in their path, weapons pods clearly visible. To their left, another aircraft waited above a narrow canyon. To their right, the mountains rose in an impassable wall of stone. Behind them, the pursuit helicopters were closing fast. They have us boxed in, Marcus said.
Not yet, Verdania replied grimly. Hold on very tightly, Marcus Chin. I am going to show you why dragons ruled the skies before humans ever dreamed of flight.
Verdania folded her wings and dove straight down toward the canyon floor. Marcus's stomach lurched into his throat as they plummeted past sheer rock walls in a controlled fall that seemed anything but controlled. The wind screamed past them, and Marcus could feel his ears popping from the rapid altitude change. At the last possible moment, Verdania spread her wings and pulled out of the dive. They shot through the canyon barely 50 feet above a rushing river, weaving between stone pinnacles that had stood since the last ice age. The helicopters tried to follow, but they were too large and clumsy for such tight maneuvering. Marcus heard the screech of metal on stone as one of them clipped a canyon wall, forced to pull up sharply to avoid crashing. They emerged from the canyon into a broader valley, where Verdania immediately began climbing again. Behind them, the helicopters struggled to reorganize their pursuit, but they had lost precious time and distance. "Impressive flying," Marcus gasped, his heart still pounding from the dive. "I am 800 years old," Verdania replied with satisfaction. "They will need more than machines to outfly me in my own domain." But their relief was short-lived. As they climbed toward another ridge, Marcus saw something that made his heart sink. More aircraft were rising from beyond the mountains ahead. Not just helicopters this time, but fixed-wing jets that moved with deadly grace through the thin mountain air. Military aircraft, Marcus identified grimly. This just became a lot more serious. "Dr. Voss has called in favors," Verdania agreed. "The question is whether we can reach the last grove before they corner us again." The jets were faster than helicopters, but they couldn't maneuver as well in the tight mountain terrain. Verdania used this to her advantage, weaving through passes and valleys that forced the larger aircraft to circle wide to maintain pursuit. But there were limits to how long even a dragon could keep up such demanding flying while still recovering from injury. Marcus could feel Verdania's breathing becoming more labored, could see the tremor in her wing muscles that spoke of approaching exhaustion. "How much farther?" he asked. "We are close," Verdania replied. "Very close." "But..." She didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus understood. They were close, but so were their pursuers. It was going to be a race to see who reached the last grove first. They crested the final ridge, and Marcus saw their destination spread out before them. The valley was hidden in a bowl of mountains, accessible only through a narrow gap that was barely wide enough for a dragon's wingspan. Ancient trees filled the valley floor, their trunks so massive that they must have been growing for thousands of years. And, among those trees, Marcus saw movement. Other dragons, emerging from hidden lairs to watch their approach. "Your people?" Marcus asked. "Some of them," Verdania confirmed. "The last grove is home to perhaps 20 dragons, all that remain of the Western Territories." They descended toward the valley, but, as they approached the narrow gap, the jets appeared overhead. Too late to intercept them, but not too late to call in ground forces. Marcus saw parachutes beginning to bloom in the sky behind them. Soldiers dropping into the wilderness, racing to reach the valley before Verdania could find safety among her own kind. "They are not giving up," Marcus observed. "No," Verdania agreed. "Dr. Voss wants what I carry too badly to let mere geography stop him." As they touched down in the valley, other dragons approached them. Marcus had never imagined he would see so many of the magnificent creatures in one place. They came in all sizes and colors, from ancient beings as large as Verdania to younger dragons barely larger than horses. The oldest of them, a dragon whose scales had turned silver with age, spoke to Verdania in a language that sounded like wine through mountain peaks. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but he could hear the urgency in their conversation. "What are they saying?" Marcus asked. "They are debating whether to fight or flee," Verdania translated. "The young ones want to face these hunters directly. The elders remember too well what happens when dragons fight humans with modern weapons. What do you think we should do?" Verdania looked at him with those ancient eyes. "I think, Marcus-chan, that you have given me an idea. Something that might save both our peoples from this conflict." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the sound of helicopters filled the valley. Dr. Voss had arrived, and he had brought an army with him. The helicopters circled the valley like mechanical vultures, their rotors beating a harsh rhythm against the ancient peace of the last grove. Soldiers repelled from the aircraft, touching down among the massive trees with practiced precision. They moved quickly to establish a perimeter, their strange weapons humming with energy that made the dragons hiss in recognition and anger. Marcus counted at least 40 soldiers, with more arriving every minute. Dr. Voss descended from the lead helicopter with the calm confidence of a man who held all the advantages. His pale eyes surveyed the assembled dragons with the cold calculation of a collector examining valuable specimens. "Dr. Voss," Marcus called out, walking forward to meet him. "This is a protected wilderness area. You have no authority here." The thin man smiled, that expression that never reached his eyes. "I have all the authority I need, Mr. Chen. These creatures represent a clear and present danger to national security. We are authorized to contain the threat by any means necessary." Around them, the dragons had arranged themselves in a defensive formation. The younger ones snarled and showed their teeth, while the elders watched with cautious intelligence. Marcus could feel the tension building like pressure before a thunderstorm. "They're not a threat to anyone," Marcus said firmly. "They've been living in these mountains peacefully for centuries." "Peacefully?" Dr. Voss pulled out a tablet and showed Marcus a series of photographs. These satellite images show thermal signatures consistent with large-scale combustion events. Forest fires that started and stopped with no natural explanation. Livestock disappearing from ranches hundreds of miles away. Weather patterns that defy meteorological models. Marcus looked at the images. They did show evidence of dragon activity, but nothing that suggested malicious intent. Those could be explained by any number of natural phenomena. Perhaps. But we cannot take that risk. Dr. Voss gestured to his soldiers, who began advancing slowly toward the dragons. These creatures possess abilities that could be weaponized by hostile forces. We must ensure they remain under proper oversight. Verdania stepped forward, her massive form towering over both humans. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the valley. "Dr. Voss," she said, causing several soldiers to step back in surprise. "I am Verdania, Elder of the Western Territories. You may address your concerns to me directly." Dr. Voss stared up at the dragon with undisguised fascination. Remarkable. Not only intelligence, but sophisticated language capabilities. This exceeds our most optimistic projections. "I am not a specimen for your study," Verdania replied coldly. "I am a citizen of this world, with rights that predate your government by several thousand years." "Rights?" Dr. Voss laughed. "You are an undocumented biological entity occupying federal territory without proper authorization. You have no rights that we are bound to recognize." The other dragons shifted restlessly at these words. Marcus could see that the situation was rapidly approaching a breaking point. Dragon against modern military technology would be catastrophic for both sides. "What exactly do you want?" Marcus asked. "Cooperation," Dr. Voss replied smoothly. "These creatures will be relocated to a secure research facility where they can be properly studied. In exchange, they will be well cared for and protected from the numerous threats that face their species in the modern world." "You mean imprisoned," Verdania said. "I mean preserved," Dr. Voss corrected. "Dragons are clearly an endangered species. Possibly critically endangered. We are offering them the protection of the most advanced conservation program in the world." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard similar arguments from developers who wanted to preserve wilderness by turning it into theme parks. "And if they refuse?" Marcus asked. Dr. Voss shrugged. "Then, we will be forced to treat them as hostile entities. Our weapons are specifically designed to incapacitate rather than kill, but accidents do happen." The silver-scaled elder dragon spoke again in the ancient language. This time, her words carried a tone of command that made all the other dragons draw back. Even Verdania lowered her head respectfully. "What did she say?" Marcus asked. "Elder Thessarian has declared sanctuary law," Verdania translated. "By ancient treaty, this valley is neutral ground. No blood may be shed here by any party." "Ancient treaty?" Dr. Voss scoffed. "I think you'll find that modern law takes precedence over prehistoric agreements." But Marcus had caught something in the elder dragon's words that made him think. Treaties implied negotiation.
Formal agreements between different parties. What if there was legal precedent for dragon rights that Dr. Voss didn't know about? Dr. Voss, Marcus said slowly, what if I told you that these dragons might actually have legal standing under federal law? The pale man's eyes narrowed. I would say you were stalling for time, Mr. Chen. And that my patience has limits. No, seriously. Think about it. If dragons have been living in this country for centuries, if they've had established territories and social structures, they might qualify for protection under the Native American Treaties Act. That's absurd, Dr. Voss replied. That law applies to human populations. Does it? Marcus pulled out his phone, grateful that he still had signal even in this remote valley. The law specifically mentions indigenous peoples with established territorial claims and cultural sovereignty. It doesn't actually specify that those peoples have to be human. Dr. Voss was quiet for a moment, his mind clearly working through the implications. Even if that were true, it would take years of legal challenges to establish such a precedent. We are here now, with lawful authority to act. But, if there's any question about the legality of your actions, Marcus pressed, shouldn't you consult with your superiors before proceeding? This could become an international incident if other countries decide their dragons deserve similar protection. For the first time since his arrival, Dr. Voss looked uncertain. Around them, his soldiers waited for orders, but Marcus could see that some of them were also considering the implications of what they were being asked to do. Verdania caught on to Marcus's strategy immediately. Elder Thessarian, she said in English, would you be willing to speak with Dr. Voss about the treaties our peoples made with the early European settlers? The ancient dragon fixed her silver eyes on Dr. Voss and spoke in accented but clear English. Young human, my people signed compacts with yours when this land was still measured in days of travel rather than miles of roads. We agreed to withdraw from areas where your people wished to build, in exchange for recognition of our sovereignty over the deep wilderness. Impossible, Dr. Voss said, but his voice lacked conviction. There are no records of such agreements. There are, Elder Thessarian replied calmly. Though they were filed under classifications your modern scholars would not think to search. Treaties with indigenous peoples of unusual character were often buried in archives to avoid public notice. Marcus felt a surge of hope. If such treaties actually existed, they might provide legal protection for the dragons. But they needed time to research the claims, time that Dr. Voss seemed reluctant to provide. That was when the second wave of helicopters arrived. But these aircraft bore different markings. Instead of the unmarked black helicopters of Dr. Voss's force, these carried the insignia of the Canadian Wildlife Service and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. What is the meaning of this? Dr. Voss demanded as figures in different uniforms began descending into the valley. A woman in RCMP dress uniform approached them with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Dr. Voss, I am Inspector Sarah Blackwood. I have orders to escort these dragons to protected territory in Canada, where they will be safe from interference while their legal status is determined. This is United States territory, Dr. Voss protested. You have no jurisdiction here. Actually, Inspector Blackwood replied, consulting a tablet of her own, according to the International Wildlife Protection Treaty of 1987, endangered species have the right to migrate to safer territory when faced with extinction threats. Given that dragons appear to be critically endangered, and that your actions constitute a clear threat to their survival, we are legally obligated to provide them with safe passage. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude toward whoever had been working behind the scenes to arrange this intervention. But Dr. Voss was not so easily deterred. These creatures are classified as potential biological weapons, Dr. Voss said coldly. Their removal from United States territory would constitute a security breach of the highest order. Then, perhaps, Inspector Blackwood replied, we should settle this matter in international court. I'm sure the United Nations would be fascinated to learn about your government's treatment of what may be the oldest sapient species on Earth. The standoff stretched taut between the competing authorities. Marcus could see Dr. Voss weighing his options, trying to decide whether he had the political backing to start an international incident over the dragons. That was when Marcus's phone rang.
The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but, when he answered, the voice on the other end made him smile.
Marcus? This is Janet Reeves from the Smithsonian Institute.
I understand you've made contact with some rather remarkable individuals who might be interested in participating in a formal cultural exchange program. Marcus put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear.
Dr. Reeves, could you explain what kind of program you mean?
Well, if these beings are truly as intelligent and culturally sophisticated as initial reports suggest, they would qualify for protection under several international accords. More importantly, they would be eligible for recognition as a sovereign nation under certain provisions of international law.
Dr. Voss stepped forward.
Dr. Reeves, this is Sebastian Voss with the Department of Special Projects.
I must insist that you not interfere with an ongoing security operation.
Dr. Voss, Dr. Reeves replied coolly, I have the President's science advisor on the other line, and he's very interested in learning why the scientific community was not consulted before you decided to treat what may be our planet's most remarkable discovery as a military threat.
The color drained from Dr. Voss's face.
Whatever authority he thought he had, it apparently did not extend to overruling the President's science advisor. Furthermore, Dr. Reeves continued, I have paleontologists, anthropologists, and linguists standing by to begin formal contact protocols. If these dragons are willing to participate in peaceful study, we can learn more about Earth's history than we ever thought possible.
Elder Thessarian spoke up again.
We would welcome scholarly exchange with humans who approach us with respect rather than weapons.
Inspector Blackwood nodded approvingly.
Dr. Voss, it seems clear that you have several legal challenges to consider before proceeding with your current course of action. I suggest you consult with your superiors while we arrange temporary sanctuary for these individuals in Canadian territory.
Dr. Voss looked around the valley at the dragons, the Canadian authorities, and Marcus.
His pale eyes held fury, but also calculation. Whatever game he was playing, it had suddenly become much more complicated.
This is not over, he said finally.
These creatures represent too significant a security concern to be left unsupervised. They won't be unsupervised, Marcus said. I'll be staying with them as a cultural liaison.
You have no authority to make such arrangements, Dr. Voss protested.
Actually, Inspector Blackwood interjected, as someone who has already established peaceful contact with the dragons, Mr. Chen would be an ideal candidate for such a position. The Canadian government would be honored to have his assistance.
Dr. Voss stared at Marcus for a long moment. You realize what you're giving up? Your comfortable retirement, your peaceful existence? Once you cross this line, there will be no going back to your old life.
Marcus looked around the valley at the assembled dragons, these magnificent beings who had trusted him enough to accept his help. He thought about Verdania, wounded and hunted, who had shown him that legends could be real. He thought about Elder Thessarian, who spoke of treaties signed centuries ago between species that had learned to coexist peacefully.
I'm not giving up anything, Marcus said firmly. I'm finally finding the purpose I've been looking for. Dr.
Voss signaled to his soldiers, who began falling back toward their helicopters. But his pale eyes never left Marcus.
This isn't over, Mr. Chen.
These creatures are too dangerous to remain free, and you're too naive to see the threat they represent.
When something goes wrong, remember that I tried to prevent it.
As the black helicopters lifted off and disappeared over the mountains, Marcus felt both relief and apprehension. They had won this round, but Dr. Voss would be back. Men like him didn't give up easily, especially when they believed they were protecting national security.
So, Inspector Blackwood said, watching the aircraft disappear, are you ready to become the world's first official dragon diplomat?
Marcus looked at Verdania, who was watching him with those ancient, intelligent eyes.
I think I'm ready for whatever comes next.
But, even as he said it, Marcus wondered if anyone could truly be ready for the changes that were coming. The world had just learned that dragons were real.
Everything would be different now. The question was whether the difference would lead to understanding or conflict.
And Marcus had just committed himself to helping determine which path the future would take. 6 months after the confrontation at the last grove, Marcus stood in a conference room in Geneva, Switzerland, watching delegates from 47 nations debate the rights of dragons. The view through the tall windows showed Lake Geneva sparkling in the afternoon sun, but Marcus's attention was focused on the heated discussion taking place around the circular table. The world had changed dramatically since that morning when he first heard Verdania's wounded cry echoing through the forest. News of the dragon's existence had spread across the globe within hours of their public appearance. Scientists, politicians, and ordinary citizens struggled to adjust to a reality where legends walked among them. Some nations had embraced the discovery with wonder and scientific curiosity. Others viewed the dragons as a threat that needed to be contained or eliminated. The debates had been raging for months, with Marcus serving as the primary human advocate for dragon rights. The delegate from the United States maintains that these creatures pose an unacceptable security risk, the session moderator was saying. Dr. Voss, would you care to elaborate on your government's position? Dr. Voss stood smoothly, his pale eyes scanning the assembly. In the months since their confrontation, he had transformed from a shadowy government operative into a public face of the anti-dragon movement. Thank you, Madam Moderator, Dr. Voss began. The United States' position is clear and, based on extensive scientific analysis. These entities possess capabilities that could destabilize global security if misused. Their ability to fly undetected through modern airspace, their resistance to conventional weapons, and their apparent capacity for coordinated action make them an inherent threat to civilian populations. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Several delegates nodded in agreement, while others looked skeptical. Marcus rose from his seat in the gallery reserved for observers. Madam Moderator, may I respond to Dr. Voss's claims? The moderator, a dignified woman from Norway, consulted her notes. Mr. Chen, you are recognized as the official spokesperson for the Dragon Collective. You have 5 minutes. Marcus walked to the central podium, feeling the weight of dozens of cameras focused on him. Around the world, billions of people were watching this debate that would determine the future relationship between humans and dragons. Dr. Voss speaks of threats and security risks, Marcus began, but, in the 6 months since dragons revealed themselves to the world, how many human lives have been lost to dragon attacks? The assembly was quiet. The answer is 0, Marcus continued. Not a single human being has been harmed by dragon action. In fact, the evidence shows quite the opposite. Dragons have assisted in search and rescue operations in the Canadian Rockies, helped fight forest fires in Australia, and provided early warning for avalanche conditions in the Alps. He gestured to a screen where images appeared of dragons working alongside human emergency responders. The sight of massive winged forms carrying injured hikers to safety or breathing precisely controlled flames to create firebreaks had captured public imagination around the world. The real question, Marcus said, is not whether dragons pose a threat to humanity, but whether humanity is ready to accept that we share this planet with another intelligent species that has rights equal to our own. A delegate from Germany raised her hand. Mr. Chen, what guarantees can you offer that dragons will continue to act peacefully? How do we know they will not become aggressive if their numbers increase? Before Marcus could answer, a new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. Perhaps I can address that concern myself. Every head in the room turned toward the speaker. Verdania sat in a specially constructed gallery section, her massive form somehow managing to look dignified despite being cramped into a space designed for humans. She had become the unofficial ambassador for her people, learning to navigate human political systems with the same grace she brought to flying through mountain passes. Honored delegates, Verdania said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's speakers, I have lived for 8 centuries. In that time, I have watched your species grow from scattered tribes to a global civilization. I have seen your capacity for both great beauty and terrible destruction. The chamber was absolutely silent. My people withdrew from the world not because we feared humans individually, but because we feared what humans could become when driven by fear and greed. Today, we see both possibilities before us. Some of you approach us with curiosity and hope. Others, like Dr. Voss, see only threats to be eliminated. Verdania's ancient eyes fixed on Dr. Voss. But we are not your enemies, Doctor. We never were. The threats you describe exist only in scenarios where dragons are treated as enemies rather than neighbors.
Dr. Voss stood again. With respect, these creatures cannot be trusted to police themselves. They possess weapons of mass destruction built into their very biology. Fire breath alone could devastate urban areas. Their physical strength could topple buildings. Their flight capabilities make traditional defenses useless. Dr. Voss, Verdania replied calmly, humans possess weapons far more destructive than anything my people could manage. Nuclear weapons that could end all life on Earth. Chemical weapons that could poison entire continents. Yet other humans do not demand that your species be imprisoned because some of your kind possess such capabilities. Marcus saw several delegates exchange glances. The comparison was uncomfortable but accurate. Furthermore, Verdania continued, you speak as if dragons are unified in some vast conspiracy. This is not true. We are individuals, as varied in our beliefs and motivations as humans are. Some of us prefer solitude, others seek cooperation. Some are scholars, others are warriors or healers or artists. We cannot be reduced to a single threat assessment. A delegate from Japan stood. If dragons are individuals with their own motivations, how can we be certain that all dragons will abide by whatever agreement we reach here? What if some choose to act aggressively? Elder Thessarian, who sat beside Verdania in the gallery, spoke for the first time. The same way you handle humans who break your laws. With justice, fairly applied, and appropriate consequences. You would accept human legal jurisdiction over dragon actions? The Japanese delegate asked in surprise. In human territories, where dragon actions affect human populations, yes, Thessarian replied. Just as we would expect humans in dragon territories to respect our laws and customs. This is how civilized species interact. Dr. Voss shook his head vigorously. This is naive idealism. These creatures are apex predators with intelligence. They will inevitably seek to dominate human populations just as humans have dominated other species. Marcus felt a flash of anger. Dr. Voss, dragons have coexisted with humans for millennia without seeking dominance. The only aggression in this situation has come from your own attempts to capture and imprison them. Because we recognize the threat they represent. Dr. Voss shot back. Someone has to think beyond the immediate future. What happens when dragons decide human environmental policies are insufficient? What happens when they determine that human overpopulation threatens their territory? What happens when the next generation of dragons lacks the restraint of these so-called elders? The chamber erupted in arguments between different national delegations. Marcus could see that Dr. Voss had touched on fears that many delegates shared, even if they were reluctant to voice them publicly. The Norwegian moderator called for order. We will take a 30-minute recess to allow delegates to consult with their governments. When we reconvene, we will vote on the proposed international accords for dragon-human coexistence. As the chamber emptied, Marcus found himself alone with Verdania and Elder Thessarian in the gallery area. How do you think the vote will go? Marcus asked. Poorly, Thessarian replied bluntly. Fear is a powerful motivator, and Dr. Voss has skillfully exploited it. But not all humans think as he does, Verdania pointed out. Many of your people have welcomed us. The children especially show no fear, only wonder. Marcus nodded. In the months since dragons had revealed themselves, public opinion polls showed a sharp divide. Younger generations were more likely to view dragons as amazing discoveries, while older populations were more susceptible to fear-based messaging. What will your people do if the accords fail? Marcus asked. Verdania and Thessarian exchanged a look that spoke of conversations Marcus had not been part of. There are contingency plans, Thessarian said finally. Options we hoped to avoid. Such as? Withdrawal, Verdania explained. Complete separation from human civilization. My people could retreat to places where humans cannot follow. Antarctica, the deep ocean trenches, the high atmosphere. We could become myth again. Marcus felt a pain in his chest at the thought.
That would be a terrible loss for both our species.
Yes, Verdania agreed. But it would be survival.
And Dr. Voss has made it clear that survival may require such measures. When the session reconvened, Marcus could see from the delegates' faces that the recess had not gone well. Several nations that had seemed sympathetic to dragon rights now looked uncertain or hostile. The Norwegian moderator called for order.
We will now vote on Resolution 2847, the International Accords for Dragon-Human Coexistence. All in favor?
Hands rose around the chamber.
Marcus counted quickly.
18 nations in favor.
All opposed? More hands rose. 22 nations opposed. Abstentions? 7 more hands.
Resolution 2847 fails to achieve the required majority, the moderator announced. The Assembly will now consider Resolution 2848, the International Protocol for Containment of Non-Human Sapient Entities. Marcus felt his heart sink.
Dr.
Voss's alternative resolution called for the capture and containment of all dragons under international supervision. It was exactly the outcome they had fought to prevent. But, before the vote could be called, alarms began sounding throughout the building. Security personnel rushed into the chamber, speaking urgently into their radios. The Norwegian moderator received a message and looked up with a pale face. Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been informed that we are experiencing a significant security event. All delegates are asked to remain in their seats while the situation is assessed.
Dr. Voss pulled out his phone and spoke rapidly into it.
His face grew increasingly grim as he listened to the response.
Madam Moderator, Dr. Voss said, I am receiving reports that dragon forces are currently surrounding this building. This appears to be an act of intimidation designed to influence our deliberations. Marcus looked at Verdania and Thessarian in confusion. What is he talking about? But both dragons looked as surprised as he was. We did not authorize any such action, Thessarian said firmly.
The main screen in the chamber flickered to life, showing an external view of the United Nations building. Around the structure, dozens of dragons circled in the air. Their wingspans blocked out the sun, casting the building in shadow. But these were not the dragons Marcus knew from the last grove. These were younger, more aggressive-looking, with scales that gleamed like armor and eyes that burned with anger. A new voice boomed through the chamber's speakers, speaking in the ancient dragon language. The words were harsh, commanding, filled with a fury that made several delegates cower in their seats. Verdania translated in a voice tight with worry. He says that the time for negotiation is over. That dragons have listened to human excuses for too long while humans continue to poison the earth and threaten all life. The voice continued, and Thessarian's expression grew grave. He declares that dragons will no longer tolerate human expansion into the wild places. That humanity has had its chance to prove it could share the earth responsibly and has failed. Dr. Voss stood, his face triumphant despite the danger.
You see? This is exactly what we warned would happen.
These creatures cannot be reasoned with.
They seek to dominate humanity by force.
But Marcus was watching Verdania's reaction. The ancient dragon looked not vindicated, but heartbroken.
Who is that speaking? Marcus asked.
Pyraxis, Verdania replied sadly.
My nephew.
One of the younger generation who believed that peaceful coexistence was impossible.
Can you stop him?
Verdania looked at the circling dragons, then, at the terrified faces of the human delegates.
I can try. But the damage may already be done.
The ancient dragon rose to her full height in the gallery and spoke in her own language, her voice carrying the authority of centuries. The response from outside was immediate and angry.
What did you tell him? Marcus asked. To withdraw.
That this action dishonors our people and destroys any hope of peace.
Verdania's voice was heavy with sadness.
He replied that peace was never possible.
That humans respect only strength.
Dr. Voss was speaking rapidly into his phone, undoubtedly calling for military response. Other delegates were doing the same, their earlier fears now seemingly justified. Marcus felt everything they had worked for crumbling around them. But, as he looked at the panic spreading through the chamber, he realized that this moment would define the future more than any vote.
Verdania, he said urgently, can you get us outside? Safely? Why would you want to leave the building? It is protected. Because, Marcus said, someone needs to show these delegates that not all dragons are their enemies. And, not all humans are Dr. Voss. Understanding dawned in Verdania's ancient eyes.
That is a considerable risk, my friend.
So is doing nothing. Verdania nodded slowly, then spoke to Thessarian in their ancient language.
The elder dragon replied with words that sounded like approval.
Very well, Verdania said. But, we do this together.
What happened next would be remembered as the moment when the future of human-dragon relations was decided.
But, as Marcus climbed onto Verdania's back in full view of the world's television cameras, he wasn't thinking about history.
He was thinking about a wounded dragon he had found in a clearing 6 months ago, and the friendship that had changed both their lives. Outside, Pyraxus and his followers waited, their anger burning as bright as their flames. Inside, humans cowered in fear of creatures they didn't understand. But, between them flew Marcus and Verdania, proving that another way was possible. The choice of which path the world would take was about to be made.